that Zoom fatigue is a thing right now, so I really appreciate you hopping on yet another one. I hope this will be useful for you if you're offering or considering offering online or any kind of virtual cooking demo now or in the future. So we want to make this fit your needs and fulfill your goals. So please do put those questions in the chat as Lillian said. And even if you think it's not applicable, we can still talk about it if it concerns doing cooking demos and the like. I'd like to welcome you all here. We want to acknowledge Community Farm Alliance. I don't know if Lori is on the call with us today, but through the generosity of a grant from Community Farm Alliance, we have been able to make this series possible. And we met with CFA more than a year ago because we just wanted to provide some resources to people trying to get other people to cook a little bit more and to use local and seasonal produce when they do. A little bit of housekeeping. This class will be published on YouTube. So we're recording. Make sure, yes, we are recording, and this will be published on YouTube. You may even see it be linked on our social media at some point. Please mute if you're not speaking at the time. And as Lily said, use chat for your questions. For extension agents, if you want KERS credit for today, thank you for putting your name and your county in the chat, but you will also need to register for this through the KERS system first. And then what I do is I just provide a attendance sheet to them, and then that's how you get your credit. So make sure you're in that KERS system if you want credit for today. So that's all our housekeeping and our acknowledgements. Who are we? We are the Food Connection, and we are a tiny local food systems unit in the College of Agriculture, Food, and Environment here at the University of Kentucky. If you're new to us, we love meeting new people and making even more connections in food. That's why we're called what we're called. So please be sure to keep our information, sign up for our newsletters, sign up to receive notifications from our social media, and that way you can stay involved in what we have going on, especially in this exciting time of carefully emerging. We're looking forward to, once again, navigating that process. We can eventually have people here in the space with me, and you won't just see me on the screen. I certainly look forward to that day. So today, I'd like to manage expectations just a little bit. Today is our tech day. This is the first in a two-part series. If you cannot attend both parts, that's fine. We will record these for the information. We're not professionals in AV or IT or anything like that. We've just been doing this since the beginning of the pandemic. And we have learned a lot through trial and error along the way. So I'm not up here to say I know how to use every kind of broadcasting, live streaming, virtual recording tech there is. I just know what we've used. So we'll try to help answer your questions as best as possible, but we may actually refer you to other people at some point when it gets a little bit above our pay grade, so to speak. Just pearls of wisdom today. So we all make this conversational, jump in. I hope some of you know each other. I hope some of you meet new people while we're talking about all of this. Who are you? Well, it is our hope that we have reached an audience who is interested in food and cooking and getting more people to cook their own food, providing access to that knowledge and skill base. That you're not necessarily professional chefs. We are certainly not asking or requiring that of you. Just if you feel comfortable in sharing your food knowledge with other people, and you're willing and ready and or already doing it, offering some kind I'll let you get back in there and hopefully you can hear me now.
Yeah, we're all good.
All right, fantastic. Okay, so there are two basic types of offerings that you can do virtually. You can do a live stream on some sort of social media platform or other software platform, or you can offer a virtual class, what we call synchronous or kind of in live time kind of class where people cook along with you. And how you choose that varies by your audience, what kind of goals you have for your class, maybe the attention span of your audience. You're going to do something a little bit different for a 9-year-old than you would for a 49-year-old, possibly, and depending on what kind of time frame that you have. So that could change a little bit. Live streams are typically fairly brief and rapid fire. They're very quick. A chef is a talking head like me, like in this front screen here, and I might just like have everything pretty much prepared and throw together 1 to 3 dishes in a very brief span of time, like 15 to 45 minutes. For a virtual class, that takes a little bit of preparation ahead of time. You might need to send out recipes, a shopping list, an equipment list, or you may even provide kits, as we do for some of our classes, wherein all of the ingredients are in a little box or a bag, and then that person takes it to their cooking space, whether that's home, dorm, apartment, and cooks along with you. So that will take a lot more time, and here's why. One, the skills that you're trying to show, you want the participant to have some time with them. So you're going to have to slow down to their pace. And oftentimes that's even a lot slower than you might even anticipate because they're trying to watch the screen, they're in their kitchen. If they're not skilled cooks already, they're going at a very slow pace and then they're checking back to see if they're doing it right. That affirmation is very important in that part of the process. And that's something that we miss not having everyone here in this space. So that will take a greater amount of time. Typically, I just try to do one dish, like a one pot or one baking dish kind of dish. If there's something else with it, it's usually an accoutrement or a garnish or a side maybe, but it might be something that you just throw on a sheet pan and roast in the oven, or it's something that doesn't take a whole lot more dish and time and space. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So you probably want to triple. I don't have a cook along virtual class that's less than an hour and a half. So we're moving at a very slow pace. And what you have to do there is sort of find a middle ground between your fastest cook and your slowest cook and try to keep everyone up and comfortable. You might need to comfort them along the way. And you will have to repeat things quite a bit. So whenever I do that, if I show how to dice an onion, I usually have 2 halves because typically I get asked to do that again. So that's the differences between like a live stream demo that's done on maybe Facebook versus a class like this where we'll be in Zoom. Now, we're going to talk about equipment. If you have any questions about equipment, if you've been struggling with something, put those in the chat now. What's the basic that you need for a cooking class? Now, we have a lot of stuff set up here today, and I'll show that to you in just a minute, but we've had over a year to work on this and build our inventory of equipment to do this. You need some piece of technology, whether that's a phone, a tablet, that has a camera and a mic. You need a Wi-Fi connection, and you need a space that's fairly quiet. You'll probably hear some of my fans in the background, but fairly quiet. There aren't a lot of interruptions, and there's decent light, okay? And you can get away without the decent light bit if you have other lights, but just the minimum equipment is a phone, let's say a cell phone, Wi-Fi, and a space, okay? And then whatever you're gonna cook with. That's how we started. And we were doing things like putting our phone in a business card holder to keep it still. I've got my stack of books back here because for the longest time, I was using my laptop that does have a web camera in it on a stack of books to get this front shot here. So as you can see, it doesn't take a whole lot to start, But once you get doing it, you're like, oh, I wish I had this, and I wish I had a better mic. As far as mics go, you can start out with any kind of earbud that has a mic on it. So I've got AirPods, and that's what I used for a very long time. You can order wireless mics and things of that nature. The more you get into those kind of high-tech things and things that are very specific to AV or video recording, the more bugs you're going to encounter. Now, if you have someone to help you with those kind of bugs, that's perfectly fine. If not, if you're working it out yourself, then you will need the time for that trial and error to figure out those bugs. Lily and I have spent a long time and a lot of stressful, sweaty moments trying to figure out bugs right before a broadcast will begin. We hope you don't see any of that stress, but that's part and parcel of adding more equipment. Once you get going, once you have your phone and your mics and your Wi-Fi and all of that, there are some other things you can add. As you can see, we've got 2 cameras up today. And I told Lily I would just like try to show you some things as we go along. We have the camera that's front facing, and then we have the camera that's on the cutting board. Now, so we have 2 cams. That means that I'm going to have stability for both of those cameras. And I'll show you right now, we have a lot of tripods around here. But I'll introduce the tripods that we're using our tech in right now. I'm going to move. This is actually a webcam. I'm going to show it to you. I'm actually trying to get you to where you can see this. Here we go. And then this is our iPad on a tripod. I tried to say it all at once. This is our iPad on a tripod, and this is a full tripod. Actually, all of these tripods will extend up to about eye level. You can get them on Amazon. If you already have a B&H account through the university, you can get them through there. They usually start at about $16, $20, and of course can go up from there, and it depends on the weight of your equipment. Don't forget that something like an iPad or a hefty camera is going to be sort of top heavy, so you want a tripod that will hold that up and not fall over. So that's up to you. That's not a huge expense to add to, and that way I can talk to you, I can engage to the audience, and then I can be right here and showing people what I'm doing at the exact same time. So that's the 2-camera system. Okay, and we'll talk about some of this visual field in a second. I'm just going to keep going and maybe show you back and forth why we do this. The other thing that we've started adding is an actual noise canceling microphone instead of, there we go, there's my noise canceling microphone. We started adding this because AirPods can cut out and sometimes there can be interference, and this just hooks into my laptop, and I'll show you that in just a minute. It goes into the USB, it has great sound, it does cancel out. Like I've got fans running and I have 5, 6 different fridges, the fans are running on those and all of the different equipment. When I start cooking, sometimes the overhead fan comes on. It's pretty good about canceling all of that kind of noise. When you have a stationary mic like this, if I walked pretty far over here, if I went to the other demo station, it would be difficult to hear. That's where the AirPods are great because they're on you and you have about 15 to 20 feet where you could walk. So you might want to consider the differences in the stationary versus a wireless mic where you can walk around. It depends on what kind of demo you're doing. The other thing that we have added, and it's made a huge difference, is you can see my hands kind of get really light as I get close to all of the lights that we have. I don't want to shine this right into your eyes, but we have a little low light here, and then we have another one right there. Try not to get it in your eye. And both of these are pointed directly to the cutting board. And that's because we have a lot of overhead fluorescence, we have a lot of can lights, and while that's great for lighting up this space, in general, it creates a lot of shadows. And sometimes, especially if you've got people on the other end, on their laptops and iPads, and if the internet connection isn't great, or if your internet connection isn't great, like you may see me a little bit pixelated as it is. So when you're cutting, here. If there are a lot of shadows from overhead or from my hands, it's nice to have this low light coming here to light up this side, and then a light from above. We do have some interference from our hood and things like that, and that will get rid of a lot of the shadows that might prevent your folks from seeing what they normally would on a cutting board if they were here. Sometimes, not often, and we have found that the 2-camera setup works best, and it just depends on the kind of demo you're trying to do. If you're outside and let's say you're at a farmer's market and you want to pan around to the farmer's market, then maybe you want someone on a 3rd camera. But we found that the 2-camera setup works really well, and that these tripods do. So before I go on at all, are there any questions about the tech, about the actual hardware that we're using?
I answered a question in the chat about how to do the dual spotlight. So you can only see it if you're a host. If you're trying to look from your end, you won't see that option. But when you're the host of a Zoom, there's the 3 dots. Could we do it on Facebook Live? Great question. When we do Facebook Live, we use a platform called StreamYard, which we're not endorsing. It's just one that we use. That's sort of a 3rd-party app that interfaces with Facebook. It's super easy to use. There's a free version and then there's a paid version, and we used the free version and we decided we liked it. So we can do a separate piece on StreamYard, but it lets you do exactly what we're doing, which is bring in multiple cameras or bring in guests and take them back out. So that's a thing to look into there.
We do rely on StreamYard. We have not gone straight from Zoom to Facebook or YouTube yet. I've seen that happen in some Zooms I've been on, and there is such a delay. And I do know people who've had some issues. If you have done a Zoom and directly streamed it to Facebook or YouTube and have some experience with that, let us know. I know a lot of people I've worked with are wary of it and they've had difficulty in getting it to stream. Sometimes. So I know that's a utility that's available on Zoom, and we all of us here at UK have the access to Zoom, but I don't know how well that works.
Tanya, I will say it doesn't matter for this live stream, but our audio is actually coming through your webcam right now, which is why I had my awkward mute moment. So it's probably selecting the source on Zoom, but we don't need to change it. I'm just letting folks know the audio that you're hearing isn't from that mic we talked about.
Okay. Unless it's possible. I'm not going to fence with it right now, so because I don't want to cut myself off.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's part of this. The other thing I wanted to make a point about is this is a lot of tech in my demo space. Okay, so we'll talk about this in really big detail right now. That's the other thing you're going to have to consider if you want to add a lot of different hardware, and that is, I've got something here, here, over there, here, and here, okay? So my setup is gonna have to be, my actual food setup is gonna have to be really compact. And we'll go into kits and how to set that up in your visual field in just a moment. But consider that if you've got something that has a lot of ingredients, or it's gonna take up a lot of bowls once you cut it up, or you're using a lot of different equipment, you need a space that you can set all that or have within an arm's reach very easily. So that's one thing. One of the reasons, I'll show you these real quick before we move on. So these are a lot of the tripods that we use. They can be used for your mics, for your lights, for your cameras, anything like this. They usually come just with a little screw top on, so you can mount an actual point and shoot camera if you want to, or a video camera directly on here. They also come with these little attachments for your cell phone, your smartphone. I wouldn't recommend putting anything larger than that on one of these, just because the tripod, the legs are not that sturdy. We had to get a separate tripod and a separate holder like this for the iPad. So that's a little bit different and a little bit more of an upgrade. But as you can see, there's two ways you can screw these on, depending on if you want a portrait or a landscape view on your camera. And they're lightweight, they fold up, they have telescoping arms, legs, whatever you want to call them. They telescope so you can go pretty high on that. You can adjust the height wherever you are. And again, you'll need space for, depending on the size, you might, so we can go in a small space with this tripod, and we'll need a much larger space for this one. And then I will point out that for, if you are planning on doing, sorry, I walked away from the mic. If you are planning on doing any kind of recipe video recording, we do have, I'll just bring it up here real quick. This is our rig. This is, it's an overhead rig. So the camera or the iPad can be screwed in right here. Again, we have to have a armature for the iPad, a separate one, so that it goes up here. And then I can hook that up here and point it down directly on my cutting board, so you get that overhead shot like you would with the Tasty video or any of the others that you like to watch. So this gives you that overhead shot. And again, this is where the lights, these side lights are really handy, because this will cause shadows as well. And you don't want that if you're trying to show people, have all of these visuals on how to cook. You don't want shadows getting in your way. So this is another bit of hardware we purchased. And then I did want to point out, if you don't have all that, you don't have the budget for that, if you do have sort of a cover that will stand up for your iPad, that's something you could use. If you have a little pop lock on the back of your phone, anything that will keep it steady while you're trying, while your hands are engaged in showing how to cook, is important. The only other thing that I'd like to point out, as far as like your space here and using all of this equipment, is we have a lot of huge open windows, and it's bright and wonderful. It's sunny right now, it's so wonderful. But we want to be careful about how we point the cameras. If I were to turn this around in any way to the side or to the front, you get a lot of backlight. So watch your backlighting, it just puts you in silhouette and none of your features can be seen. I think most of us know by now that we want cameras up and at least at face level, rather than looking up, or a little bit above, rather than looking up at us. So be careful about where you put your cameras, and you might want to, we'll go through this too, you might want to do a test run and kind of record and see how everything sounds, see how everything looks. Preventing noise and interruptions, we've seen all of the fun Zoom videos where kids and pets and everyone else has walked in the background of a Zoom. So you may want to, especially if you're working in a busy office, make some signs to put up to say video recording in process, please do not disturb. You know, you want to prevent anyone from walking in with a delivery or something like that. So manage your space in regard to that. Make sure you have enough real estate, not only to put everything out while you're showing the demo, while you're starting to cook, but that you have space for putting things you've used, or having someone there to help you take things from you, so that your horizontal real estate is what I like to call it. That doesn't get crowded. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to show you is we have worked on the dynamics of where we put our cameras and how we put them on the tripods and moving them back and forth. I not only use them for the cutting board, but I also use them on the stove for when I'm sauteing to show people. So we finally decided that this webcam is great. And what's nice now is that I can move that back and forth. It is attached to my laptop. I have to be strategic about where I put my laptop. But now I can, if I want to saute something, all I have to do is pick that up and move it, rather than adjusting on a full-size tripod, which is what I was doing before. Okay. Backwards. All right, so now we need to get going. How to start, you just want to make sure that you are giving people enough notice for your demos. So whatever your promo strategy that has worked in the past, you want to think about that. For this, I love to get people to register, send that reminder the day before. I figure that's a nice amount of time to jog your memory without it being too late. So that's the way we do this. We often do an outline or cut. It's not quite a storyboard. I'm not sitting here sketching, but I'm kind of going through, especially for live demos, I sort of go through and say, these are the important things I want to highlight. So these are the shots I want to make sure to get. If it's important to me to show you how to dice an onion, then it's important to me to show you each and every part. Or if I'm talking about knife safety, then I want to make sure that I have all of these shots of how to cut toward the board and how to hold the knife and how to hold your hand right here in the camera and not from just that one far away. Now, sometimes if you just have one camera, you might want to think about, are you going to go from a front shot like this and then move it to on your cutting board, or if you're just going to keep it on the cutting board the whole time? But I do think face-to-face is important for audience engagement, if that's possible. Recipe selection is important. We will really go into this into great detail next week on Tuesday, but think about, I had Lily knows what example I'm going to use. We were training some students to go out and be demo ambassadors for us at one time, and one of our participants just insisted she wanted to do French onion soup. And I kept telling her, well, there are really basically two elements to French onion soup, and none of them can really be done in front of you because they take a really long time. You have to make a beef stock, you have to caramelize onions. No one's going to sit there and watch that happen. So, and it's probably not that thrilling to just put those two ingredients together, a little sherry, and then put the crouton on top. So we had to talk her out of that and be like, well, there needs to be something that you can demo. So I love showing people how to break down veggies. Showing people how to dice an onion is probably one of my favorite things because I think it's such a functional skill. And it's one of those that, when I used to, before I was a chef, when I would look at recipes and cookbooks, if it had a lot of veggies to chop in it, I went right past. Well, then I wasn't adding a lot of vegetables to my own diet. So I was passing up a lot of things because I didn't know how to break down vegetables. So for me, that's a really important skill to show. And so when I make my kit up for my demo, I like the whole veggies, or at least something that is in the approximate amount of what I'm going to use so that I can show people that skill. So you have to select your recipe carefully and make your little run of show list at least. Figure out how you're going to do registration. We use Google Forms for any of our free offerings. We do have to go through WorldPay, being a University of Kentucky unit, for anything for which we charge registration. And I'm sure if you do that kind of programming, you've worked through all of that as well. If you're working with partner organizations, you need to state up front how that's going to work. Do you need their logos? Are they going to be on camera? Are they going to come in and want to do some sort of talk about their organization and why they think it's important to do this demo? And then what I do is I go, well, here's what I want to happen here. So today I want to help equip you on the technical side for how to do your own virtual demos and classes. And so I work backwards from there. What are all the cogs that go into that machine? And then I have to make sure I add all of them. So start with your goal and then work backwards. Now, visual space, and I've talked about this somewhat already. So you want to be really organized in your visual space. And you have to think about this not just from your cameras, but once you get going on a demo, it's kind of like a horse and carriage that's bolted. You're just gonna have to hang on for a ride. Now I used to start with a very specific outline and I want to cover all this. And then it got to the point where I finally had to admit to myself, I'm not looking at my outline. So you want to get yourself set up for success, first of all. Try not to crowd your space. As you can see here, I've got my cutting board and my knife. I've got a rag here because I try my best not to have to stop or walk out of frame very much. So I don't want to be washing my knife off all the time. So I keep a damp rag here so I can wipe this And so I can wipe off my cutting board if anything should dirty it. And that way I don't have to switch anything out. I don't have to step away. And I'm in frame and engaging with the participants all the time. You don't want your frame to get too crowded, and especially not your cutting board. You want to make sure that once you cut something up, go ahead with this onion here, and I want to show you a little something else in regard to that as well. So once I cut this onion up, I show each part. I talk about bringing it towards the edge of the board and how we're going to cut almost, but not all the way through the onion. And then once I get done cutting this up, then I want to get it off my board. So you have to have either some containers, we call these little prep bowls, so that you can then clear off. I don't care how big your cutting board is, you want to keep it clear. It helps you stay focused. It helps the visual field stay clear as well. So I always have a discard bowl right here. If you find you don't have room for a discard bowl, then what you may want to do is have a garbage can right here. So if you don't have the horizontal space to have a discard bowl right there, you might want to have a garbage can near you. And then I want to get rid of anything excess. So a lot of times I'll have another pan back there to put any excess food in behind me. That way it's not in my visual field. That helps your learner as well. It keeps everything as clear as possible up here. So you don't want to crowd this space that you have with too many items. Be careful about what ends up on screen. I don't want to do this because I'm going to block everything. So I want to make sure that everything that I reach for is kind of in this area or behind me, because I don't want to keep putting my arm in front of the camera. One, it has to refocus all the time. It changes up the light. And two, it's distracting in a way. Your audience is going, I wonder if she realizes she's reaching in front of her camera all the time. So that's something you want to be cognizant of. Sometimes if your space, we know that, like, what's it called? Laced up from the waist up, when we're on Zoom, we're like, okay, from here up is how I need to look good, and I can have just shorts on below. Be careful with that in a demo space, especially if you are doing something like moving your camera around and you've only cleaned up this part, because if you spin the camera around, don't forget, people are going to see everything that's out as well. I learned that when I was filming from home and was moving, and I had a stack of boxes over off to the right. And I thought, oh, well, everything's right here. But then I turned the camera to go to the stove. Didn't think about the fact that that whole pile of boxes was going to be seen. So be careful about that if you're doing a demo. Where to look while speaking. When you have two cameras, at first it's really confusing. You might just make sure that you know where your camera is on your device, so that you can kind of look people in the eye. And if you look away, that's fine, but always make sure to come back to the right person or to the right camera. And we've had guest chefs on who haven't understood. They'll sit over here and they'll look toward the webcam the whole time, not realizing this is how you engage with your audience. Okay, so camera angles, I think we've pretty much covered that. Like I like to set this here. I like to have it pretty close. I'm trying not to move too much because I know that could be horrible as well. What I don't want is maybe to have it over here so that all you see is, well, that's a little exaggerated, but like right here, you don't want people to be looking at your floor the whole time. You want them to focus on this. So try to work out your camera angles so that you get the best angle each time. Sometimes I'll spend like 5 minutes kind of futzing with it, adjusting, coming back around, seeing how it looks, looking at both of these. I usually sign in pretty early. And tripods too, we used to try to keep the iPad right here, and then I would swing it between the cutting board and the stove, and then the legs of the tripod were in my way. So that's why this setup works a whole lot better for us. And also guest chefs, I was trying to move the camera around a little bit too much and you want to show into the saute pan and see what's going on, but you don't want to get your chef's way either if you do have a guest chef situation. And the other thing that took me a while to get used to in the beginning is to make sure that all of your equipment is charged. Because the last thing you want is to be hampered by a bunch of cords plugged in, if you even have that possibility. I mean, we have one plug right directly in front of me. Our lights are wired, so I need that plug for our lights. So it's not tenable for me to have my iPad and my laptop plugged in as well. Also, you want to make sure if you're using AirPods that they have a full charge on them. That's the worst thing in the world when you're in the middle of talking and you want to be heard clearly, and for that to cut out, and then you have to use your computer speakers, which sound a whole lot worse. And also include all of the background noise as well. So to do that, make sure you charge. That's kind of on my checklist of things to do, is to make sure everything's charged each day. The other thing is to test, and I briefly mentioned this, but we always get on when I have a buddy, and even when I don't. If I'm by myself especially, I like to get on at least about 15 minutes early. That way you can test mics, you can test cameras, you can look at your angles, you can see where the lights go best, you can experiment with the food that you're going to use and see how that works. And it gives you just an opportunity to make all these adjustments to make it a little bit better each and every time. So, and we've even done dress rehearsals, especially when we add new equipment. We like to do a dress rehearsal a little bit ahead and just to see how things are going. If you wanted to broadcast straight from Zoom to Facebook or YouTube, then you might want to set up a little dummy account and try that as well and see how it does and see how it works out at the end. That's about it for, oh, the other thing I wanted to show you on the visual field, if you do have participants that have visual impairments, have difficulty seeing contrast, then cutting a white onion on a whiteboard might be difficult still for them to see. So I have these are those little flexible, like cut and pour cutting boards, and they're in lots of different colors, maybe blue for very high contrast. And I'll show you the difference real quickly, because we are kind of getting toward the end here, last third of the class. So you all saw how I cut the onion on the whiteboard, but if you do it on the blue, it's going to show up. It's going to be a much higher contrast. And your participants, again, also maybe even without visual impairment, but just a low broadband speed, it might be pixelated. So seeing the white and the blue together might be easier, even for something, a case like that. You can see the contrast of the white and the blue, and even the knife kind of shows up a little bit more in that case. So that's something to consider. Pour that in. Not as efficient as I thought it was going to be, but you get the idea there. Any questions about that, your visual field and what participants are going to see when the camera's on there?
I've not seen anything in the chat, but we will, Tanya, we've had a request to put a list of the equipment options and sort of setups together and follow up with that. So I said
yes,
we do that.
We can follow up with that. I would say our other class would love to have that too. So just a few notes, unless you have specific questions like the one about how to spotlight or highlight in Zoom. Straightforward and easy is to directly publish to Facebook or to Instagram TV, or directly live cast to YouTube or any of the Twitch, any of those live broadcasting types of applications. And most people are pretty familiar with that. The third party kind of platforms, like we were mentioning StreamYard. What we like about StreamYard for live stream is the ability to bring in, I think now, it used to be 6, now I think it's like 9 or 10 cameras. So you can have different guests pop in and out. I can have a multitude of cameras up for whatever kind of thing I want to show while I'm on camera. GoToMeeting does that as well, Vectera. There are a lot of different platforms that allow you to do that, and I think it just depends on your budget and what is most user-friendly to you, what kind of platform is most user-friendly to you. So that's up to you and your organization. Other interactions you may want to do, in Zoom, it's really fun to do polling. You also have the possibility to do breakout groups, which not as relevant to, I think, cooking, unless you're having kind of a competition. That would be the application I would think would work for there. Any other related materials, if you want to send out recipes ahead of time, or if you want to post them and then put a link in the chat for people, you need to think about how you want to interact with them with any kind of textual elements rather than just your cameras. And then the other thing I want to talk about as far as just organization in the last few minutes here, just as far as organization and keeping your space is kits. And I'll talk about this in a lot of detail next week, but I did want to show you, we have student workers who help us here and we love them. They are sponges and they really absorb a lot and then they do things on their own. So I just asked my students to put together a kit and I've got to show you what they put together. This is absolutely beautiful. Like they set it up. I just wanted things thrown into one kind of pan here, but they set it up so beautifully and they put all the different colors here, and I just wanted to brag on them a little bit in regard to how they put everything here together. Kits are really great for food, also for equipment. I'm not going to show you because it's kind of over in a cluttered area, but we have a kit, an equipment kit for a 4-H class we're going to have tomorrow evening. Everything's already set up all together. All my cutting boards, knives, spatulas, colanders, everything is in a pile that I can just pick up, lift, and bring here to my demo station. If I'm doing multiple recipes, this is necessary. That way, and it's not usually like this. A lot of times, oh, I did bring this in. So this is a little bit more in line with what we set up. So you can see that we've got cheese over here in this bowl, ricotta here, we've got an egg, we've got onion quarters already quartered up. So I've got the mozzarella already shredded. I've got the parm, I want to show that on camera. So that is not already shredded, it's whole. I've got the, bring this closer here. I've got the, parsley here. I want to demonstrate how to pick that off and how to mince that up. I want to demonstrate how to dice the onion and demonstrate how to mince the garlic. So that is in here whole, but it's in the amount I will use. So it's broken down a little bit more than this. This is more for your color pop in your visual field. I mean, granted, think about it. You've got this white field and you're going to be cutting on it. So I like to use as many colors as I can, just because that's more visually interesting to your participant. It shows them how to eat with the rainbow, even without you saying it, So we have the whole trend of show me you do this without tell me you do this without telling me. Show them all the colors that they can incorporate into their food, and that especially with all this beautiful local seasonal produce that's about to come to bear as we move into the growing season. Show them all the different options that they have for putting these recipes together. You're keeping your recipe simple so that people can repeat it, and so that you can get their interest and make them feel successful, and that they can do this all over again. So sometimes that limits you to about 5 ingredients. So make those 5 ingredients count. Questions at this point? Any specifics I may have missed? Anything you've encountered with doing your own that you'd like to discuss or get kind of the group opinion on?
So we've got, can you tell us more about the noise canceling microphone? Your sound quality is very good. Do you mute all of the other equipment and use that instead, or is this something that is incorporated to one of your devices? So that microphone is about $50 on Amazon. I think it's a USB mic. I will say that this recording is coming just through the webcam. So
That's over here. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's an integrated camera and microphone, and that thing maybe costs $100, but there's much less expensive versions. But having something that is a dedicated either camera microphone that's not just the onboard parts of yours will greatly improve the quality. And then a question about, and you can ping us, Melissa, if you want to go more in depth on that. It does require doing some specific settings in your Zoom so that you're separating the mic from the camera from the speakers. It's possible, as you say, but you just have to kind of double check them because sometimes they revert to defaults. And then Tanya, can you talk a little bit through the kits? So our friend M. Vasquez is seeing these groupings, you call them kits. So yeah, just give another rundown of what constitutes a kit. So is it by recipe? Is it by activity?
And I can send this, I will send out one of my, I have a pre-made storyboard for you and I can send it out. So on my storyboard, let's say I have 3 different recipes I'm going to do. I'm going to do polenta with sauteed veggies and a tomato sauce. Then I will say, here, make me a kit for this to my students, and they're used to this. So that will say, okay, in this kit for polenta, I need cornmeal. I need a quart of veggie stock. I need a zucchini and 1 zucchini and 1 small squash washed. You know, so anything I will need them to do ahead of time, I want to make sure to state that explicitly. I need you to clean and dry some mushrooms and go ahead and de-stem them because I don't want to show stemming them on the camera. I just want to show cutting. So that is my kit list. And then they go through and they put everything together in some kind of container. Now, if you don't have all of these roasting pans like we do, you can put it in little Rubbermaids or in bowls or something like that. But yeah, I have food kit and I have equipment kit. And I'm almost, let me grab this one. So we've been cooking with 4-H every month in lieu of them being able to do cooking clubs. So here's my kit and here's my list. I don't know if you can see. So this is my list of equipment. And you can see it's checked off because the student has gone through and gotten everything together so that I can lift one thing up and just put it here on the demo station. Now I'll need to rearrange it because this is cluttered and it would be too much. I'd have to shift things around too much. So I will then kind of parse things out in the order I will use them. So like my grater, I will probably put in the back because I'm not going to use that till the very end for that parm on the end of the dish. But something, I'll go ahead and put the pans on the range and then something like the colander that I'm going to use first thing to show draining the spinach for this lasagna. We're going to keep that up front because that's going to be close. And I will send this out. So I'll have it, it has a list of the foods, it has a list of the equipment, and then it has a list of all the shots I want to get. So that I have everything outlined that I want to do. Like I said, set the goal, work backwards from it.
And so Tanya, would you put a kit list together even if you were doing it for yourself?
Oh yes, I'm so forgetful. Especially now, like COVID fog is the worst. So I need the list maybe more than they do because they're young and they still have those bear trap memories in mind. And they probably could put this together without a list better than I could.
We've got a question from Martha Yount saying, thank you. And thank you, Martha, for your praise. Any more practice tips for cook-along classes in particular? So when folks are cooking along at home, things that make those successful.
Yes, because that's a great question, Martha, and it's good to see you, by the way. It's been a long time since you've been in here. It's good to see old friends. With the cooking classes online, and like I said, I work with 4-H groups, we work with the Student Activities Board, and then we work with the community. We've worked with the community as well. If you are just sending them a list, like pick these things up, here's the recipe, here's the equipment, and then at 5:30 we're going to cook. You want to be very specific with what you send to them. don't assume knowledge. And also when I send lists to people to pick up ingredients, I try not to be too specific. So I don't say white onion, yellow onion, red onion. I just say onion or cooking oil or vinegar. I want people to use as much as possible of what they have in their pantry. So that's important. And we'll probably talk about that a lot next week. But what's important when people are cooking along with you, they're nervous. That's the biggest thing, is that they're nervous and they're trying to watch you on this little bitty screen, and it could be really pixelated or grainy, and they're trying to go along. And the first thing I try to tell them, because they get really upset if they can't keep up with me. But at some point, you have to get through the class. You know, you need to finish by an hour and a half. So I try to tell them up front, one, I'm going to go really slow. I'm going to repeat this more than once. If you have questions, please let me know. And you don't have to keep up with me. If you don't keep up with me pace by pace, that is perfectly all right. In fact, I am the guide. The recipe is your map. I am just going to tell you how to use your map, and you still have that map to refer to as you cook. So that's one thing I try to manage those expectations from the beginning. Secondly, I do a lot while I'm breaking things down, trying to remember what I'm going to use for tomorrow. So I might show them, the biggest thing for me to show them is stability of this and using the knife correctly so they don't injure themselves, but also manageability. So especially when you have a 9-year-old and they're going along with you, and I'm just trying to get this to a point where I can make my illustration. So I will take my time and I will show it to them more than once. So a lot of times I am purchasing 2 and 3 peppers, even though I'm only going to use about half of it, just so I can show them several times. The other thing I love to show them is manageability. And that they don't have to be some sort of chef all at once. So instead of, say, cutting this whole piece, I'm like, why don't you cut that in half? And then you can cut your strips out of that. And then once they get their strips, if their little hands can't manage this whole pile together, then I'm like, you know what? Let's cut this in half. Let's just do this. Or if you have slices of something, let's say we were going to cut this down and I'm stacking them up because I'm trying to get through the demo so that I am able to look toward them and engage them and then answer the questions they have. So I do need to get through the demo so I'm available. So I'll stack things up and start cutting, and I'll say, well, if you're not comfortable or if your stuff is slipping around, then take this off and do it one slice at a time. So as I'm going through, I'm trying to give them tips and tricks. And that takes a lot of anticipation. That takes a lot of experience with the different questions you get. It takes a lot of them going, wait, I'm not there yet. Before you can anticipate a lot of these things enough to mention them while you're going through the demo. With carrots and things like that, again, even if it's not little hands, even if it's inexperienced hands and they're not used to this big old chef's knife, then I'm like, why don't you cut this into 3-inch slices, and then you can break that down from there. And I break everything down. Like when I start to saute, and this is something you have to remember as far as timing, is they're not on a gas stove probably. They're more than likely on an electric stove. It's going to take a lot longer. So you may want to mention to them a few steps ahead, hey, we're still working on breaking down our veggies, but you may want to turn on your burner and get your pan on your burner. That's another way to, you're starting to get them to think about those time management steps so that they can get to the same place you are at the end. You know, the end result is what is important. And then let them know at the end, if they're still cooking, that's perfectly fine, that it'll probably finish up in a few minutes. But, you know, and I have to do the magic of TV sometimes where I'm making the dish, but I have one already in the oven. Again, that's so I can pull it out and demo, and then I am available for questions, not worrying about finishing off my dish.
How much can you? I thought that was great. We've got people love the map analogies. So I wonder too. We see a lot just the concept of mise en place, and I wonder how much of folks falling behind is them not having everything set out on the counter next to them.
That's a big part of it. And that you may, you know, they may have everything sort of out
Yeah.
on their counters in their kitchens, but they're not used to this level of organization because they can cook at their own time. I mean, my brain is still in getting prepped up so that I can serve 100 people that night. I still can't leave all of that behind. So one thing you may want to do is one, I will really like put in bold and capital letters if something needs to be pre-cooked. So if I am going to run through and my chicken is already pre-cooked, I will really make that bold in the recipe. I will put it in the instructions for when they purchase things, like I need you to purchase 2 chicken breasts. Make sure these are pre-cooked in the list itself. But then when we start the demo, if there's anything like that I'm concerned they may not have done, I will say, hey, if you have not pre-cooked your chicken, turn your oven on now, or get a saute pan, or if you haven't pre-cooked your pasta or your rice, go ahead and get that started now while I'm talking. So that way that can be cooking while we work on the other part of that dish. If, you know, so I anticipate people not following instructions. Surprise, surprise. That's the other thing you have to do. So it's really about setting the expectations early as much as possible, but then just assuming that they're not following that instruction and get those things going. And then managing their worry when they haven't, because then they feel guilt and shame. You are managing their guilt and shame at that point. Just be like, it's okay. Just go ahead and get it on. While we're doing this, just make sure to keep an eye on it. When it comes to a boil, turn it down to a simmer. And by the time we get done, you can set your rice off and you'll be in the same position we will. So you are kind of managing their fears about this whole process, because people do have a lot of fears about cooking, especially when it's with a professional, with an authority figure. So you are there, you're kind of massaging their emotions just a little bit.
Okay. So in our last 2 minutes, we had one question about getting ready for recipes for the next class next Tuesday. So you want to run folks through what to do between now and then?
Yes, what we'll do is we will send out, if you want to cook along with me, it's going to be a little bit different because we just have an hour, but there is a dish I will have you cook along. And when you register, I will go ahead and send that out to you so that you can shop for that, or if you have any questions about it, you can email me, and that you can get everything set up. The way I send it out usually is I do a shopping list. I try to do the shopping list by kind of how you find it in the grocery to make that part simple for you. But if you would also like to have it in kit form, I can do that as well, because I will need to set that up for our student workers who will help me set up for this class. If there are any, which I don't anticipate, usually for a class this short, it'll be something that we just saute up really quick, or like a salad that we put together with a vinaigrette. But if there's some kind of pre-cooked piece, then I will certainly mention that and put that in the instructions. And I'm sending you an example of a map too, so you can take a look at that. And I can make that specific to our recipe for next week.
We have an interest in the kits form. I think they like seeing the format.
That's just
and
a
asking
table. I'm sorry.
Where to register, Tanya? Is it the virtual cooking class Savory Surprises? No, that's old.
No, well, I will put the link up for that. I probably will do that today. It'll be an event on Facebook, and then I will email you the link in the follow-up emails to this. We'll be sending out an evaluation for this class as well. If you would just it's just like 5 questions. If you would take a moment to do that, and I can send out the food map and the registration link with that.
So for folks who weren't registered for today, should they just pay attention to the Facebook? Is that the best place?
Yes, and if you registered I did have registration required at the beginning of the Zoom, so I may have emails, and I will send this to all the emails that I have. And if not, if you don't receive anything from me, then yes, I would look on our Facebook for the event that I'm about to post. Perfect. It'll have the same logo. It'll look the same as the one for today.
Okay. Well, thank you to everyone for your thanks. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, T, for a great intro. We will follow up on the equipment list, some info on StreamYard, and If you joined us late, please put your name and county. If you're here for Curse Credit with Cooperative Extension, if makes no sense to you, don't worry about it. You're not with Cooperative Extension. And we'll look very much forward to seeing y'all next week.
Thank you all so much for joining.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.